The candlelight in that Seattle restaurant flickered against the polished glass, and I remember staring at my distorted reflection as a cold knot formed in my stomach. The waiter's uneasy glance, the way Ryan's hand hovered just a little too long over the bill, it all pressed against me like a warning I couldn't name yet. My pulse was louder than the soft jazz humming through the dining room, and for a moment, I felt completely untethered. If you've ever trusted someone a little too quickly, subscribe and tell me where you're listening from, because what happened next still shakes me when I think about it. I didn't know it then, but that was the night the truth began to slip through the cracks. Let me show you how it all began. I knew something was wrong the moment the check landed on the table. It was supposed to be a simple dinner at an upscale place in downtown Seattle, something light and comforting after a long week. But the waiter hesitated when he set the leather folder down, almost as if he already knew I would be the one reaching for it. And I did. I reached for it before I even thought, the way I had been doing for months without questioning why. As I slid the bill toward me, I felt the familiar tightness in my chest. It was an uncomfortable mix of embarrassment and instinct, the kind that whispers that you should pay attention because something doesn't feel right. Ryan sat across from me, relaxed, confident, perfectly composed. If he noticed my hesitation, he never let it show. That was his gift, I suppose, making everything seem normal, even when it wasn't. I remember thinking how strange it was that I still felt so unsteady inside. After losing my husband, I had spent so long searching for anything that resembled connection. Ryan stepped into that emptiness so easily, almost too easily. He said all the right things, did all the right things, and yet moments like this, these tiny, sharp red flags, cut through me. The restaurant was warm and elegant, but the longer I sat there, the colder I felt. I didn't know what exactly was off, only that something was, and that uneasy feeling, the one I kept pushing aside, was about to lead me back to where it all began, because none of this started in that restaurant. It started long before, in a moment when I was far more vulnerable than I realized. In the quiet days after losing my husband, I moved through life almost mechanically. I kept myself busy with small routines, anything that made the hours feel structured. Most days I ended up at the same grocery store in Bellevue, wandering through aisles I barely remembered walking down. I wasn't looking for anything new back then. I was just trying to stay upright. That was where I first crossed paths with Ryan. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some sweeping moment. It was simple, an unexpected kindness in a place where I rarely felt seen. I remember noticing how easy it felt to talk to him, how he seemed genuinely interested in the little pieces of my day. At a time when everything felt heavy, the lightness he brought into those brief encounters felt like relief. He had a natural way of slipping into my routine. One day, I would bump into him near the produce section, and the next, he would appear by the bakery with a warm smile. Slowly, those moments became the highlight of my days. I didn't call it connection at first. It just felt like someone had finally noticed I still existed, and that alone softened something in me I thought had closed for good. Looking back, I can see how quickly I let that comfort turn into trust. I can see the way I leaned into his warmth without asking many questions. When someone fills a quiet space in your life, it's easy to believe the universe placed them there for a reason. At the time, I told myself I deserved a little happiness. I told myself he was exactly what I needed. What I didn't realize was how easily hope can blur the edges of caution. And those blurred edges would soon reveal the first signs that something wasn't as perfect as it seemed. In those early months, everything between us still felt warm, but little things began to unsettle me. They were small at first, easy to brush aside, easy to excuse. I remember asking about his work, hoping to understand that part of his life better, and he would give these vague explanations that never quite lined up with the stories he told before. At the time, I convinced myself that some people are just private, that not everyone explains their job the same way I do. Then there was his social life, or more accurately, the absence of one. For someone who seemed so charming and confident, he never introduced me to anyone. No friends, no coworkers, no childhood stories anchored to real people. It struck me as odd, but I told myself it was because the relationship was still new. Maybe he wanted to take his time. Maybe I was overthinking. When he suggested a trip to Germany, the idea felt unexpectedly sudden. A part of me lit up at the thought of adventure, something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in so long. But another part, quieter, heavier, wondered why he wanted to travel so soon and why he seemed so eager for me to say yes without hesitation. Looking back, my instincts were already nudging me, asking me to slow down, to ask more questions. But hope can be loud when you've been lonely, and I let that hope speak for me. I agreed to the trip, trying to quiet the uneasiness settling in my chest. I had no idea that saying yes would carry me straight into the heart of something far darker than I could imagine. When we landed in Munich, I remember feeling a strange mixture of excitement and heaviness. The air felt colder than I expected, sharp in a way that woke me up after the long flight. For a moment, I let myself believe that this trip might help me step into a new chapter. But almost immediately, little details tugged at me. The same quiet doubts I'd tried to ignore back home. Hannah greeted us outside the terminal. I had heard her name many times, but meeting her in person felt different. She was polished in a way that made me instantly self-conscious. Perfect hair, expensive coat, that effortless European confidence. Her eyes skimmed over me just long enough for me to feel evaluated. Then she shifted her attention entirely to Ryan. I told myself I was being sensitive, that the cultural differences were throwing me off, but something about her presence tightened my stomach. The apartment was the next surprise. She had described herself as a student sharing a modest space, yet the place looked like something out of a luxury catalog. Sleek furniture, costly appliances, art pieces I couldn't imagine any student casually owning. Every corner whispered money, but not the kind that came from part-time jobs or family support. I felt out of place before I even set my bags down. What unsettled me most, though, was the way they slipped into German the moment they were alone together. I couldn't understand the words, but I understood the tone. Soft, quick, intentional. And whenever I walked into the room, their voices would fall silent, replaced with overly bright smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. I caught myself pretending not to notice, as if acknowledging it would make everything unravel. By the second day, the awe of being in a new country had faded, replaced by a prickling sense of not belonging. I felt like a guest in someone else's story, someone kept just far enough on the outside. Deep down, I knew something wasn't aligning. I didn't have proof yet, just a growing certainty that this trip was not what I thought it would be, and soon, that uneasy feeling would turn into something far more real. It was late that night, the kind of late when a house feels too quiet. I couldn't sleep. Something about the day had settled wrong inside me, and I kept turning over small moments, trying to soothe the uneasiness. That was when I heard their voices, soft at first, then sharper, drifting down the hallway like they were trying not to be heard. I told myself not to move, not to get involved, but curiosity pulled me out of bed. I stepped slowly toward the living room, stopping just before they could see me. I couldn't understand most of what they were saying, but I recognized enough. I had secretly taken German lessons before the trip, hoping to make a good impression. I never imagined those lessons would save my life. Certain words cut through the air with chilling clarity. Money, widow, perfect target, American. Each one hit me like a blow. I felt my entire body go cold as the pieces began to fall into place. The sudden trip, the secrecy, the way they shut me out with their language. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't being overly sensitive. I had walked straight into something I didn't understand. As I stood there, hidden in the dark, I felt my heart break and harden all at once. This man I trusted, this man I let into the most fragile part of my life, had never loved me. I wasn't a partner to him. I was a plan. I backed away from the doorway, forcing myself not to make a sound, trying to control the trembling in my hands. Everything had changed in an instant. Every warm memory felt poisoned, and deep inside, I knew this wasn't just betrayal. It was danger, real danger, and it was only the beginning. In the hours after overhearing them, something inside me shifted. The shock was still there, sharp and disorienting, but it settled beneath a colder, more focused fear. I stopped moving through that apartment as a guest and started moving through it as someone studying a threat. Every glance, every whisper, every strange errand they ran together took on a new meaning. I watched the way Ryan and Hannah coordinated without speaking, how they exchanged quick looks whenever I entered a room. Their timing was too perfect, too rehearsed. Even their kindness felt scripted, and suddenly the pressure to visit certain shops made sense. They took me to a jewelry store where the staff greeted them like familiar customers. I remember noticing the way the clerk looked at me, as if she already knew why I was there. Ryan nudged me toward pieces far beyond anything I would ever buy for myself, acting as if it were all part of some romantic surprise. But his eyes were fixed on the price tags, not the designs. Later that night, while they stepped out for what they called a quick walk, I searched through the bathroom drawers, desperate for something that confirmed what my instincts were screaming. That was when I found the small vial tucked behind a stack of folded towels. Next to it was a blister pack of pills with warnings I couldn't fully translate, but the symbols alone made my stomach twist. I held them in my hand, feeling the chill of the truth settle deeper. This wasn't just about money. It wasn't about heartbreak or deceit. It was about my life. I snapped photos quickly, my hands trembling, trying to stay quiet enough that no one would know what I'd found. I didn't have a plan yet, only the certainty that I needed proof, and I needed to stay calm. By the time they returned, I had already made up my mind. Whatever was coming, I had to be ready. And the next day, everything would escalate in ways I couldn't yet imagine. The next morning, they told me we were taking a drive into the mountains. I felt the words settle in my stomach like stones. Still. I climbed into the back seat and watched the city fade behind us. The farther we drove, the quieter everything became. No traffic, no people, just long stretches of winding road that made my pulse quicken. Every turn felt deliberate. Every detour felt planned. I kept checking my phone, hoping for a signal, but the bars disappeared one by one. Ryan and Hannah spoke softly in German, their voices clipped and urgent. Even without understanding everything, I caught enough fragments to know this wasn't a sightseeing trip. When we pulled over at a scenic overlook, the drop below us looked impossibly steep. I felt my legs shaking as I stepped out, sensing how easily a single shove could erase me. While they walked a few steps away, I typed a coded message to my daughter, pretending to take a photo. I kept it simple, just enough to signal trouble without raising suspicion. Then, in a small store nearby, something inside me snapped. I overheard them discussing timing and opportunity, and I finally said aloud that I understood German. Their faces changed instantly, the masks slipping. In that moment, all pretense disappeared. They grabbed my arms as we left the store, their grip tight, no longer hiding the threat. But as Ryan opened the car door, I found a surge of instinct I didn't know I had. I twisted free, stumbled, and ran. I could hear them behind me, calling after me, branches snapping as I pushed deeper into the woods. My breath burned, my legs shook, but I kept running. Just when I thought I couldn't go any farther, I saw a shape through the trees, a forest ranger. I collapsed at his feet, my voice barely a whisper, knowing I had escaped one danger only to step into the next. When I collapsed at the ranger's feet, I felt a wave of fragile safety wash over me. He knelt beside me, speaking in a calm, steady voice, and for the first time in hours, I let myself believe I might survive. He guided me toward his truck, promising help was already on the way because he had radioed in a suspicious situation earlier. I clung to that hope like a lifeline, but it shattered almost instantly. Before he could start the engine, Ryan and Hannah appeared out of nowhere, moving fast, their faces twisted with a fury I had never seen. They yanked the door open and dragged me out before the ranger had time to react. I remember the look in his eyes, fear, apology, helplessness, before they forced me into their car again. My mind screamed, but my body was frozen, too shocked to fight. The drive that followed felt endless. We went deeper into the mountains, down narrow paths that didn't look like roads at all. Their voices were cold, clipped, no longer pretending. I could feel the violence simmering between them, the certainty that they were running out of time and wanted to finish what they started. I stared at the trees rushing past the window and wondered if that would be the last thing I ever saw. Then, faint at first, came the sound of something distant, thudding, rhythmic, growing louder. A helicopter. Then another. The car jolted as Ryan cursed under his breath. Moments later, sirens echoed through the trees. Flashing lights cut through the branches. The car skidded to a stop. Everything happened at once. Officers emerged from both sides of the road. Someone shouted commands. Ryan bolted but was tackled almost immediately. Hannah tried to pull me out as a shield, but hands grabbed her before she could reach me. I remember falling to my knees on the gravel, shaking uncontrollably as the weight of it all finally broke through. The ranger was there minutes later, breathless, relieved, helping me to my feet. And in that moment, surrounded by officers, lights, and the cold mountain air, I realized the operation that nearly took my life was collapsing right in front of me. For the first time, I truly felt safe again. When the officers finally led me away from that mountain clearing, my body felt heavier than it ever had. I remember sinking into the back of the ambulance, every muscle trembling from exhaustion and shock. At the hospital, the hours blurred together. Nurses checked my vitals, officers asked for my statement, and I tried to hold my voice steady as I walked them through every moment. It felt unreal, like I was recounting someone else's nightmare. The only thing that grounded me was seeing my daughter rush into the room. The second she wrapped her arms around me, something inside me cracked open. I let myself cry in a way I had been holding back for days. Her voice, her warmth, her steady presence reminded me that I was still here, still alive, still loved. That was the first time I allowed myself to believe the danger had truly passed. In the days that followed, investigators shared parts of what they uncovered. Ryan and Hannah weren't just manipulative or reckless. They were part of a pattern, a calculated scheme that had touched other women across different states. Hearing that chilled me. It also brought a strange sense of clarity. None of this had been my fault. I wasn't naive or foolish. I had been targeted. Recovering wasn't simple. I battled waves of guilt, flashes of fear, and long stretches where my mind replayed every red flag I ignored. But with each passing day, I felt a small shift, a little more strength, a little more trust in myself. And eventually, a quiet conviction grew inside me. If I survived this, then maybe I could help someone else survive their own version of it. Maybe telling my story could be more than healing. It could be a warning. And that understanding led me toward what I needed to say next. Surviving something like this changes the way you see the world. It forces you to look at your own strength, your own intuition, and the quiet parts of yourself you once ignored. I never wanted to learn these lessons the hard way, but standing here now, I can say they shaped me into someone more grounded, more aware, and surprisingly, more hopeful. There were days when the fear felt heavier than anything I had carried before, but slowly, I learned to trust my instincts again, to honor the voice inside me that spoke up long before the danger became visible. If there is anything I hope people take from my story, it is this. Listen to that voice. It is there to protect you. I am deeply grateful to everyone who helped me, my daughter, the officers, the ranger who found me, and every person who stood by me as I pieced my life back together. Their kindness reminded me that even in the darkest moments, there is light waiting to guide you out. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If parts of my experience touch something in you, I hope you will share your thoughts. Like this video, subscribe if you want more stories, and tell me in the comments if you have ever faced something that changed you. I read every word.